This is the new cylinder head I picked up for the L200. It's an FAI branded complete head assembly. I've just placed the painted rocker cover on that you saw me do earlier to keep any debris out, but it's a complete, as I said, complete head assembly with cam and rocker arms. Came with new head bolts as well, along with fitting kit for, looks like exhaust studs, a few other fittings for the head. I also have all of the old parts from the old head, so between them hopefully we can put a complete head assembly together. Let's have a go. Unfortunately, the last temperature sensor fitted did not come out in one piece, but it looks like it melted anyway, probably when the engine ran out of coolant, so it's junk. But we'll put it in the hole just to keep something as a placeholder. These rather grotty bolts are for this bracket, which is also not great, so I'll give this a quick clean up before it goes back on. I'll give that a quick paint as well, just because the rest of the head is so nice. While that's drying, we'll put these where they need to go so we don't lose them. I'm not sure if you can see, this was the one that came off. This is the one that's been provided. It's a bit tricky to see, but the seats don't quite look the same, so I'm not sure how well that's going to seal. We'll try the new one, but I'll keep hold of the old one just in case. This is a coolant bleed off port, again from the old head, so we'll move this one across. Again, more brake cleaner. This is a tapered fitting, so no need to include any thread sealant. So one thing to be careful of course, as the cam is on, some of the valves will be depressed, so make sure you're doing this on a soft surface, not a hard surface, otherwise you risk bending the valves. Got a little oil return here. It's not needed in this application. It looks like it's a tapered thread. It's not a 10. It's not an 8. Conveniently, it's a 9. It's a taper thread and it's tight. Just worth checking. We won't be needing this. I assume this is for fitting on this side, but because we've retained the stock one, we don't need it. When fitting studs, make sure the smaller portion is in the head and the longer portion is outside for the manifold. There's probably a few different ways to install studs. These are going in very, very easily. And actually, I may leave these out for now. I'll install the head onto the block without these, and then because I've left the exhaust manifold still fitted to the turbo, it's going to give us a little bit more clearance to get the head on without interfering with that manifold, and then I'll be able to thread these in through the manifold, and it should save us a bit of time and a bit of headache. So we'll save these for later. I've got a new gasket for the cam cover, so we'll pop that on now. This is a Febby part. I have no affiliation with Febby Bilstein or Blueprint, they're all the same manufacturer, but I find their parts are normally quite reasonably priced, and I've used them on lots of applications and lots of my other vehicles and not had any issues, so let's hope it's the same here. So one main gasket, two small. In this kit they've given me 2 half moons, but we only need one, so you will need to use a bit of silicone along here for sealing, but for now I'm just going to put it in position. Like so. Give the valley in the valve cover gasket a good clean. It's important for the new gasket to get a good seal. So I've just been cleaning along here. Ideally you would do this on a clean surface, but seeing as my workbench is not clean, I'm going to be doing this in the air to try and protect the cleanliness of the cam cover. It's a good fit, quite happy with that. There's a few things that need to be cleaned up before the final installation. There's a bit of debris on some of the inside portions of here, so we'll quickly wipe that out now. Okay, I've given that a quick clean, very quick clean. So we'll place this on here now temporarily, but like I said, some portions of this will need sealant on final assembly. These small grommets sit in here, replacing these old ones here, which are rock solid and definitely not sealing. Clean up the bolts as best we can. I'd love to clean them off and replate them, but unfortunately I don't have access to a plating kit. But these are not going on for final installation and are just simply here to keep any debris out of the head while we're working. Perfect, so we'll leave those not even hand tight. We can flip the glow plugs. As far as I'm aware, these are all functioning correctly, but we can test them and we can find out. Like the other parts, we'll give these a quick clean up. So we can test the glow plugs by measuring the resistance between the tip and the body. So we're looking for a value here between 0.1 and 0.15 ohms. These are the glow plugs that I took out of the damaged head. As everything else has sustained some damage, it's worth checking these are operating correctly. So you should be able to check for a resistance value between the body and the feed. So you can see here we have a small resistance value of 0.6 ohms. On the next one we have nothing. Good. On the next one we have 0.7, 0.8. As you can see, these are a bit all over the place. On the last one, we have nothing, nada. And we can check this further with continuity. So there's a connection there being made between the two probes. Nothing. Another one. Connection. So we have a faulty glow plug, and as the others are out of spec for resistance, we need to change everyone. We need to change all of them. So add it to the list. Here's the bracket I gave a quick paint from earlier. So let's pop this into place before it gets lost. And while we're here, we can temporarily pop on the cam gear. I say temporarily because we will have to take it off to fit the cam seal later. We can loosely put it in place to remember where it is. The damaged glow plugs I spoke about earlier, I'm just going to slot them into place. We won't be using them, but it's handy to put them in here, so when we put the if we put the cylinder head on before the replacement plugs arrive, then we know nothing is going to get into the cylinders and damage them. So not screwed in properly, but just as placeholders. Right, okay. As everything around cylinder number 2 was effectively destroyed, so the glow plug was dead on cylinder 2, the temp sensor at the front of the head was also dead, and everything wasn't looking so great. I decided to test the fuel injectors. Now you can't have them sent away to be tested, and with electronic fuel injectors in the past that's all I've done. But as these are mechanical injectors, it's easy enough to test, so I picked this up relatively cheaply off eBay, made of the finest cheap parts, but it should work for our purposes. So this is a one injector unit, so it's a pintle injector purely working off mechanical pressure. So what I wanted to check is actually whether all of these injectors were working correctly and whether they were firing off at the correct pressure. So let's hook one up and see where we get to. So to avoid spraying everything in diesel, I'm just going to drop a bag over the end of this. It's not a great way of doing it, but at least we can check that the pressures are all the same across all four. I suspect this is probably not well calibrated or calibrated at all, so I think as long as the pressure is the same between all four, we'll take that as being okay. So you can see the pot pressure there is about 2,500 psi. It will release the pressure. We'll unhook this one and we'll try the next. again with the bag. So this one pops a little higher. At about 3000. And we can check the spray pattern. And it looks okay there. This is the injector from cylinder 2. Making quite a mess of diesel on the floor. So again, this pot pressure is around 3000 psi. That is out of spec for these injectors, but again, like I said, I don't know if this is calibrated or not. And it's not a certainly not what I would consider a finely tuned engine particularly, so let's hope it can manage. Lastly, final injector. That doesn't want to thread on. There we go. Again, pot pressure is about 3000. You can also use this to check for leaks. So you can see we have a pressure applied and we can watch for leaks on this injector. Now, it's important to be really careful when you're using this. Don't put your finger on the end of the injector because it will inject fuel into your hand. It will end up under your skin, and obviously there are not insignificant health risks with that. So if you don't want blood poisoning, don't put your finger over the injector. Okay, by now you can see the head is looking pretty tidy. We've just tested the injectors, so we know that they're all okay and ready to go back together. To install the injectors, you need to replace 3 consumable washers. They look like this. So one is for the bottom of the injector, one is for the middle of the injector, and for one is the top one here is for the return rail for the injector back to the fuel tank. So we'll start with cylinder 1. This is the first washer that we're going to use. I'm not sure if you can see, it's flat on the top side and rounded on the bottom side. And this sits on the tip, keeping it away from the heat of the engine. So if you've got some small tweezers, best to do it like this to grip it as you drop it in place. So that one's installed, so don't forget that one. Next up is a copper washer. This keeps the fuel where it needs to be and not out of the head, so go ahead and drop this one in next. So those are all of the sealing points that you need. So we'll clean up the threads with a bit of brake clean. Make sure there's no nasties in there, and we'll go ahead and drop this injector in. So we'll just do hand tight for now, and then we'll come back later to seal everything up. So repeat this process and I'll see you at the end. This in the this hole in the head here is a little bit sticky, so I suggest there might be a damaged thread perhaps. So we need to be a little bit careful sending this one in. So we'll try with a socket, but we need to be careful. This is a 22. Okay, so after an initial tight spot, it seems to have gone in well enough. So of course there is a torque value associated with these, and we need to make sure that we hit that accurately. Okay, so the correct torque value for getting all of the injectors torqued into the head is anywhere between 49 and 59 Newton meters, so right at the switching point over between most torque wrenches. So we'll split the difference and go for, let's say, 54. And again, you're going to need a 22mm socket for this. I'm going to use something that I've not seen that often before, but maybe it's because I don't have the right size torque wrenches or sockets. It's a 3/8 to 1/2 inch adapter. Normally most of them go the other way. And again, once everything's torqued, we'll be marking it with a paint pen so we know. We'll go check all of them again. Not the traditional way to use a torque wrench, but whatever works. So it was a good idea just to mark things just so you know. Just so you remember, and it's always useful when you're checking things later if you have a problem, you know if something was torqued down or not. So the next part of this fueling system that we can put back together now is the fuel return rail. And you might have noticed these small washers. Again, single use crush washers. That don't want to come off. So I'm going to very carefully try and encourage them, and you do need to be careful because this is a mating surface and you don't want any damage to that surface, otherwise you risk sealing issues. So there you go, one washer with 2 holes. And the last one, of course, was easy. As with everything, make sure it's nice and clean. Using a small amount of brake clean and a clean towel. Like I said, these are sealing surfaces, so be careful not to mark them or damage them in any way. The fuel return rail I cleaned earlier. You can see there's the return ports, and of course this sits on top of the injectors here. It's a very specific angle, but of course we need the washers in here. This washer set for me was about £12. Or probably whatever country, currency you're in, hopefully be somewhere similar for you. But these do need replacing after use. So mine was stuck down with sticky tape, and I just want to make sure any residual adhesive is gone from the surface. Okay, so all of those are on. We'll give the return rail a final spray on the sealing surfaces again, and we'll drop this onto the rail. Like so. And then we'll put the retaining nuts back on the injectors. And these, as with everything, will need to be torqued down. And while the injector lines are off, make sure that you're not getting any kind of dirt inside the injectors. And the correct torque for these is 27 Newton meters, and that's a 17. So what I'm going to do is take one pass on all of these to where it stops, to avoid bending this return rail and potentially snapping it. So make sure all of these are level before you start torquing down. So 27 Newton meters. And we'll check again. And as per previously, we'll mark each of these to specify that it's been torqued to spec. To try and keep these free of dirt and debris, I'm going to take a finger from a glove and place it over the top of each injector. Maybe a bit extreme, but can't hurt. I already have the gloves, and it's not cost me really anything to do this, and it's a nice insurance policy. Perfect. Okay, on to the next thing. The glow plugs. All of these are out of spec and one is completely not working, so I'm going to replace all of these. So I'm going to replace these with an Ngk Glow Plug, and that's the part number there for what I'm going to be using. These are a 12mm. Something that I'm not sure about actually is whether these protrude from the bottom of the head. So I'm going to put these through by hand, and then we'll check to see whether these actually protrude. If they do, then we'll back them off a little bit and we won't torque them until the head is on the block. I'll tighten these down slightly. to stop the cam cover from wandering around while we do this. So let's have a look. Okay, I've checked. These don't protrude from the face of the head. So we're going to very gently wind these in with a gun. So I've set this to soft, and it's going to be done really as light as possible, and as soon as there's any resistance we're going to stop. And we'll stop there. The torque value for these is given on the box, which is 15 to 20 Newton meters. We'll go for 17. Okay. And again, I'll give these one small paint mark to tell me that they've been torqued. While we're here, we can pop on the bus bar. Unfortunately, I can't get this as clean as I'd like to get it. It's not great, and it doesn't really match with everything else looking nice and fresh, but it's still functional. Unfortunately, I don't have a plating kit. If I strip this, I can't replate it. These are 8mm nuts. There is a torque spec for these, and it's 1.8 Newton meters. And any normal person would just do them up hand tight. But I think I have a torque wrench that goes that low. And if I do, we're going to use it, because we can. Here it is. Actually, the click was so soft there that I missed it. There you go. 2 Newton meters. I think we actually went too far with this one, so we'll back that off and re-go. There you go, 2. So near enough now. This is back together. Of course, I want to check the torques on the camcat bolts. We're going to need to set the adjustment for the lifters, and we need to install a cam seal. But I think for tonight we will finish, and we'll carry on tomorrow.